We're going to chat today through the Oxbridge journey. I'm using that just to shorthand Oxford and Cambridge. We'll talk about choosing where to apply, what the application process might look like for you, and what to actually expect when you get there. So a little bit about me to start. My name's Georgie. I was at Morton for 9 years, from year 4 through to sixth form. I did A-levels in maths, further maths, physics and chemistry, and then went on to study a master's degree in computer science and philosophy at Hertford College, Oxford, from 2018 through to when I graduated in 2022. Since then, I've been in London working as a quantitative trader at a financial firm called Jane Street. So let's start at the beginning. You're where you are and you're figuring out where you want to apply to university. I guess your first question might be, why Oxbridge over anywhere else? So there are two particular things that make Oxbridge a little bit different from other universities. The first of them is what's called the collegiate system. So you might have noticed at the start I said I went to Hertford College, Oxford. Both Oxford and Cambridge are divided up into what's called colleges. And as well as being a member of the university, you'll be a member of a specific college there. This is where all of your pastoral care happens, so you'll likely do the majority of your dining in your college, they'll likely provide your accommodation for at least part of your university stay, your sports teams, your music clubs. A lot of them will be done through your college, though there are university-wide ones as well. Something slightly unique about Oxbridge over other collegiate universities such as Durham that exist in the UK is the college system is also where a lot of your teaching happens. Which brings me on to the second thing that makes Oxbridge a little bit unique, and that's the tutorial system. So university teaching at all universities in England tends to have two types of teaching. The first is lectures, which is kind of like here, someone who hopefully knows what they're talking about, stands in front of a room of people and tells you stuff. You take notes, you maybe ask questions at the end, but in general, large group sessions. Most other universities then have something called seminars. These will be smaller groups and allow you to ask more specific questions and engage with the tutor on a more individual level, but they do still tend to be slightly larger groups, maybe 20 people and one tutor. And you'll work to some goals beforehand that you can then discuss, but you're maybe not getting the same individual treatment that you might in an Oxbridge tutorial. The Oxbridge tutorial format, on the other hand, is very small group. The largest tutorial I ever had was 3 students and 1 tutor, and the majority of mine were just either me and a tutor or 2 students and a tutor. You'll be set some work beforehand. In STEM subjects, generally a problem sheet. In humanities subjects, generally an essay. You do this beforehand, you send it to your tutor so they can mark it, and you then get to have an hour with just you and a friend and a leader in their field discussing the work you've done. This means that your teaching can be incredibly tailored to you. In philosophy, when there were subjects I preferred, my tutor would just set me a different essay that week, so I could write on something I was passionate about rather than something I didn't care about as much. In computer science, when I was struggling with areas, we could just go over those questions and not have to spend any time discussing the questions I already found easy. Or we could just ignore those questions and she could give me extensions so that I can improve on them. You don't have to spend any time sitting while we go through stuff that we need to make sure all 20 people know, because your education can suddenly be almost perfectly tailored to you. I'd even pick my tutorial partner normally so that they were someone with the same passions as me, so even if there's 2 people and a tutor, it's still tailored to your individual interests. So if that sounds something that you'd like to do, then maybe Oxbridge is for you. It can be pretty intimidating, there's nowhere to hide if you're the only person in the room who's being talked to by this tutor, but it's also one of the most rewarding ways to learn. You're treated like an equal by someone who's been studying this for 50 years. So if Oxbridge is for you, then which one? You can't apply to both. They're one of the few pairs of universities where you can't apply to both Oxford and Cambridge, so before applying you have to pick. The only way to pick, I would say, is to pick based on the subject. Oxford and Cambridge teach very different degrees even for the same subjects. In fact, in a lot of subjects, they don't even both offer the same degree. I studied computer science and philosophy. Oxford doesn't do a pure philosophy undergrad, as far as I know, whereas Cambridge, you can do pure philosophy. So if philosophy is something you're interested in, what you should think about is, do you want to do it on its own, or would you rather partner it with another subject? That's the only way to answer which one of them is for you. It's far more important to decide whether your English degree wants to focus on how Cambridge does theirs or Oxford does theirs than to think about which city you'd prefer to be in. The academics is really what matters here, so pick it based on that. Once you've decided which university to apply to, you also then get to pick your college. I think a lot of people get quite stressed out about how to choose a college. I'm going to start by saying it's the lowest priority decision. Everyone I've met, everyone I've talked to says that their college is the best and they couldn't have had a better experience at any other college. So for a start, you could do what's called an open application and just say, I don't care about the college, put me anywhere that has space. And it's also worth noting that even if you do apply to a specific college, you might end up at a different one. They don't want to disadvantage you if you happen to apply to the college that everyone else is applying to that year. So if, for instance, Hertford gets 20 applications for CompPhil and Balliol only gets 2, they're not going to turn down the Hertford people just because they happen to apply to the oversubscribed college. It's more likely that the university will discuss between colleges, they'll still pick the best students, and maybe you applied to Hertford and end up at Balliol instead. Some things you might want to consider though, where is the college? Do you want to live in the city centre, where you're a 2-minute walk from all of the buildings, but maybe there's not much green space? Would you rather be far out, where you probably have to get a bicycle, but there's loads of green space to roam around in outside of lecture time? Do you care about whether your college is incredibly old and has a lot of history? Or does that sound kind of intimidating to you and you'd much rather be at somewhere newer with maybe better facilities to use? Do you care about whether your college has 600 people in your year or 60? These can all be really good ways to choose which college you want to go to. Cool, so you've made all your selections, you know what you're putting into the UCAS boxes. What does the application process look like? It starts like other universities, UCAS application, write a CV, send that off. One quick thing to be worth noting, the deadline is earlier than other universities. Talk to your careers department, talk to your teachers, they'll know what the deadlines look like for the upcoming season. A large number of Oxbridge degrees then have entrance exams as well. There'll be information on what these look like on all of the course pages. The entrance exams are incredibly important. Particularly for STEM degrees, they often say that the entrance exam will be the main determining factor on whether you get an interview or not. If you do really well on the entrance exam, it doesn't matter how bad the rest of your application might look, they'll want to interview you. So it's worth studying hard for these. There'll be loads of past papers online for them. YouTube is absolutely your friend. People like me who've been through these and the university themselves put up tons of resources on how to revise for these. I'd recommend starting that at least a couple of months before you sit the exam so that you can prepare yourself as well as possible. If your CV looks promising, if your entrance exams go well, then hopefully you get to the interview stage. Oxbridge normally does multiple interviews for each application, so you get a couple of chances to talk to different people, to shine in different ways, and if one of them goes wrong, it also isn't the end of the world. Interviews are subject-based. They're not going to ask you about a time you showed leadership, they're not looking for any sort of skills that HR might normally ask for. They're going to ask you questions about your subject and see how you can engage with new and challenging material in a small group setting. Think of the interviews as mimicking a tutorial. If you want to study philosophy and I ask you a question about how Plato's views on knowledge compare to Aristotle's, and I've given you some text on what those mean, maybe you've never seen either of those before, but can you engage with new material and debate with a tutor for 20 minutes and show that you can critically think about these views and come up with some exciting answers? Are you able to respond to what they think and change and adapt your views on that? Are you able to know when actually you want to stand your ground and you found the views you believe in and you're able to defend those well? In STEM subjects, maybe I give you a maths question and it's nothing like you've seen before. I want you to graph the function sine of x squared over root x. It doesn't matter if you've not seen that before. It matters that you know what the graph of sine x looks like and you know what the graph of x squared looks like, and you can talk to someone about how you're thinking and how you might go through from the basics you currently know to a more complicated solution. They don't expect you to know it all already. They don't expect you to have read every work in the English literary canon. What they're seeing is if you can learn, and more importantly, if you can learn in the environment that they want to teach in. Cool. So you've picked the university and you've applied. Results days come and hopefully you've gotten your offer, you've gotten the A-levels that you need, and you get to start there. what does the degree actually look like? A day in the life of Oxford is going to be pretty varied, but I guess I'll talk you through one of mine, and then I'm happy to answer any questions afterwards about how it might look different for different people. So a day for me starts off pretty early, 5:45 a.m, my alarm goes off. This is because you might see that the second part of mine is rowing. One of the main Oxbridge stereotypes is rowing. It is not compulsory, you do not have to do it. I did it because it was a stereotype and I completely fell in love with the sport. So I grabbed myself some quick breakfast and I'm down on the river far before the sun rises, out in the freezing cold in a boat with my crew. We're on the river for an hour and a half or so, and then quickly cycle up to college where it's warmer to grab one of the amazing Hartford brunches, full English, every day, £2.50, and have a chat with some friends over some good food. I'm very much a morning person, so I like to front load my studying and get as much of it done before lunchtime as possible. Most people hate that idea, and I think if you ask any other university student, their day is going to start with waking up at 11 a.m. So take this with a pinch of salt. STEM degrees often have lectures earlier in the mornings, so that works quite well for me. After breakfast, I'm cycling over to the Department of Computer Science for probably a couple of computer science lectures. The way you might think of the flow of learning something at Oxford or Cambridge is you have lectures on it. Maybe they're going to be talking about ethics, and so you have a lecture on consequentialism. Later the next week, you'll probably have a tutorial which will involve writing an essay on consequentialism. So I go to the lectures, I listen to what they say, I take my notes. Afterwards, probably want a leg stretch and a bit of a break, so I head over to uni parks with some friends. One of my favourite things about Oxford is, if you're looking to apply, it's probably because you're passionate about a subject. And maybe you've spent a lot of your life thinking, I really wish that I had someone who wanted to talk to me as much about Shakespearean literature as I want to talk about Shakespearean literature. When you get to Oxbridge, you are in a room of people who are excited to talk about the subjects you're there with. So I go on a walk with my friends, and while we talk about many things, I've got to say I spend a lot of that time talking about philosophy, talking about computer science. We're there because we love it, and some of my favourite conclusions I've come to about my subjects have been from randomly strolling around the park, having a chat with friends and going, oh my god, I suddenly understand what I was trying to write about last week. Really wish I'd realised that before the shoot. Head back to Hartford for a bit of lunch and probably a library session. Like all universities, there's a lot of solo study that you need to do. I've got an essay to write for a tutorial a few days from now, I've got a problem sheet to solve for a tutorial tomorrow. So I open my laptop, put some music on, and start getting through my reading, my problem sheets. I tend to work in a very collaborative environment at university, and this is often encouraged. It isn't a competition, everyone can get a first-class degree if they manage to meet those standards. And so you've got your friends there, they're doing the same things as you, particularly if you've got a tutorial partner who's going to be working on the same essay. Discuss it with them. Do the reading for half an hour, talk to them about what they thought, then go write the essay. After maybe a couple of hours in the library, I'm pretty much done for the day. 6 hours of work is all I've got in me in one day, so head back to my accommodation, and the evening's mine. I won't tell you what an evening in the life of a uni student looks like, because it's kind of up to whatever you want it to be. I'm not much of a night owl, so I am not great to comment on what the clubbing scene is at Oxford, but more sports communities, music events, orchestras that you can be a part of, games if you want to play them, clubs if that's your thing. It's pretty much all available to you in, and I can't speak for Cambridge, what I would say is one of the most beautiful cities in the country. So I've kept that nice and short to leave time for questions, because the whole approach is very tailored to you, and I think it's much more important that you find out what you want to know about the experience. But that's a day in my life. Any questions? Yes?